no decision has been made by the U.S. regarding its troops in Niger. However, it is clearly stated by junta to leave Niger. Many diplomatic talks have been uncovered just in a single week. What does U.S. have to say about Niger, and why it doesn't want to leave the region? What is Nigerian junta is planning for the eviction of U.S. forces, and how they're running their country? Let's uncover the questions in this video, so be with us until the end. This statement comes a day after the Niger said that U.S. intends to submit a plan to disengage its soldiers from the region, and after Niger canceled its military agreement with the U.S. earlier this month, considering the presence of the U.S. and its 1,000 troops and contractors illegal. Nigerian government spokesperson Amadou Abdramane justified the decision because it was not democratically approved and imposes unfavorable conditions on Niger, particularly in terms of lack of transparency on military activities. The agreement, which facilitated the illegal presence of American military personnel and civilian staff from the Department of Defense within the Nigerian borders, was labeled by Niger as unfair and a tool used by the U.S. to undermine the nation's sovereignty. Since then, U.S. officials downplayed the magnitude of Niger's action and tried to promote a toned-down narrative that does not reflect badly on the United States. Celeste Wallander, an Assistant Secretary of Defense, told lawmakers at the House Armed Services Committee that Niger's decision was not as severe as initially thought, and that the U.S. was trying to find a loophole to keep its troops in the African nation. Wallander said the CNSP has said the status of forces agreement, which sets the terms of a U.S. military presence in a country, is now null and void. However, she said the junta has assured us that American military forces are protected and they will take no action that will endanger them. The U.S. military has about 650 troops and another several hundred support personnel still in Niger, which in the past has been a critical hub for counterterrorism operations. But last July, mutinous soldiers ousted the country's democratically elected president and months later asked French forces to leave. Wallander further said that the U.S. is continuing to look at ways to conduct operations against violent extremist organizations in the region. He described that the self-identified government of Niger has not asked or demanded that the United States military departure from Niger. There is actually quite a mixed message, and we are following up and seeking clarification. The coup came shortly after the Presidential Guard detained President Bazoum at his residence and sealed off access to public offices in the capital city, Niamey. Local media reported that the decision was triggered by President Bazoum's alleged plan to dismiss General Omar Chiani, who the commander of the Presidential Guard. As a result, the U.S. and France evacuated both embassy staff members and their citizens from the country. After the bolt from the blue that arrived last Saturday with the announcement of the military junta of Niger of wanting to suspend, with immediate effect, the military cooperation agreements with Washington, after that the United States is trying to take action so as not to lose a strategic outpost for the fight against jihadist terrorism in the region's Sahel. According to reports from the U.S. news portal Al Monitor, the Pentagon has not yet issued the order for U.S. troops to withdraw from Niger as the president's administration Joe Biden. He still hopes to negotiate with junta leaders in a bid to stem Russia's military penetration into Africa, and remains in contact with Nigerian officials via the embassy in Niamey to seek clarification on the announcement. In the sights of the Niamey authorities, accusation of having made a secret deal to supply uranium to Iran and the threat of retaliation by a U.S. delegation led by Molly Fee, who Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, and also including the General Michael Langley, commander of the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, who paid a 3-day visit to the country last week. Here's a reminder for you all that this topic has already been covered with details in a separate video, which tells that how secret deal of Niger to supply uranium to Iran have been exposed by U.S., which you can watch after this video ends. Link is mentioned in the description. Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh explained in a press briefing that the Pentagon is in contact with the Nigerian authorities and is working to find a way to keep U.S. troops in the country, which represents an important base for counterterrorism operations in sub-Saharan Africa. U.S. personnel have largely consolidated to one base and continue to run drone operations, but those are limited to force protection, and there are ongoing conversations with the CNSP to discuss the path forward. She further said that Washington is concerned about the country's growing ties with Russia and Iran. She said this while pointing out the Niger's secret uranium deal with Iran. Before we proceed further, discussing the reasons of U.S. not leaving Nigerian region, I'd like to hear from you. Are you finding this video informative? Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the comment section below. And if you're finding it helpful, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us reach a wider audience and the content that you'll love. Let's continue this journey together. The quick turn of relations had some U.S. lawmakers questioning how Niger could go from a strategic ally to being run by a junta in such a short time. American officials also voiced alarm in the meetings about several other issues, including whether Niger's military government was approaching to a deal to give access of Niger's vast uranium reserves to Iran. In a press briefing, State Department's spokesperson Vedant Patel said that ongoing discussions between the interim government in Niger and the United States have examined the withdrawal of U.S. troops from the African nation's grounds and the steps that would follow. He announced that the U.S. authorities are in contact with the National Council for the Protection of the Homeland, CNSP, the name taken by the military junta that took power in Niger after the coup last July 26th. It is worth recalling that the situation has been in a domino effect since July 26th, when members of the Nigerian Presidential Guard ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. Subsequently, they closed the country's borders and imposed a curfew until further notice. The council statement came after the visit to Niger of a U.S. delegation, in which Patel further said that we asked for more information from the transition authorities to evaluate the next steps, adding that U.S. cooperation with West African countries brings benefits for both parties, especially for the achievement of common objectives, such as the fight against terrorism and the creation of a context favorable to economic and social development. Before the Nigerian junta's announcement that it wanted to stop military cooperation with Washington, the Pentagon's commander-in-chief in Africa, General Michael Langley, to tell Senate lawmakers that a number of other countries in the Maghreb and Sahel regions are on the verge of being captured by the Russian Federation in terms of influence, thanks in part to Kremlin-led disinformation campaigns that spread false narratives in the region. Langley further said that this is the southern flank of NATO. We must be able to maintain access and influence across the Maghreb, from Morocco to Libya, noting that both Russia and China are pursuing long-term strategies in Africa. I think at an accelerated pace, the Russian Federation is really trying to take over Central Africa and the Sahel. There are more than 600 million people across the continent on social media now, compared to just a very small minority who had access just a decade ago. Russia has actively and strategically saturated that audience with disinformation, and what we teach, the law of armed conflict and civilian-led governance, is failing because it's being drowned out. Langley said he has asked the State Department for additional resources to counter Russia's disinformation campaign in the region. The announcement for leaving the country represents a serious blow for the U.S. presence in a country considered strategic for the fight against terrorism, also from an anti-Russian and anti-Chinese perspective. The U.S. Army had around 650 personnel working in Niger in December, including troops stationed at a major drone base near Agadez, built since 2018 at a cost of $100 million, which was used to target Islamist militants in the desert, which includes the ISIS, JNM, and groups like Al-Qaeda. Now the situation is that if the forced withdrawal of the U.S. military is confirmed, then it would represent a huge step backwards for Washington, which especially in recent times had shown itself to be rather conciliatory towards the junta, in the evident fear of being ousted from a strategic country, with the serious risk to see it slip into the Russian orbit, as well as neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso. Although last October, the U.S. had officially defined the military seizure of power in Niger and the dismissal of the democratically elected president as a coup Mohamed Bazoum with all the consequences, in December, the U.S. envoy for Africa, Mali Fee, had opened to the restoration of aid and security ties by the United States if Niger met certain conditions. Prior to this announcement, Niger had previously ended military cooperation with France. However, Italy remains present in the country with the bilateral support mission in Niger. The Italian presence, therefore, does not appear to have been affected in the slightest by the coup in Niamey. On the contrary, last the 9th of March, a high-level Italian delegation, the Secretary General of the Farnesina, Riccardo Guerriglia, paid a visit to the Sahel country, which defense sources described it as very positive, and on the occasion of which it emerged that training courses for the Nigerian army and police will soon be restarted, while civil and military cooperation activities have never stopped and will continue. Niger is, on the other hand, considered increasingly close to Russia, which has made concerted efforts in recent years to expand its influence in the region, especially through partnerships in the security sector. And last December, the two countries announced the signing of an agreement which provides for the strengthening of military cooperation between the two countries. Also, in neighboring Burkina Faso in recent months, Russia has deployed a few hundred soldiers from the Africa Corps, while it is estimated that around 1,000 Russian soldiers are fighting alongside the army Malian against jihadist groups. Finally, in Mali, after the double coup of 2020 and 2021, the military junta strengthened relations with Moscow, definitively breaking those with France. It is worth remembering that recently, in November, the Bamako junta signed an agreement with Moscow, which includes the construction of a gold refinery in the capital. The agreement, the Malian ministry reported in a note, provides for the construction of the refinery to process 200 tons of gold per year and is intended to be valid for 4 years, although the construction times are not specified in the document. For your complete understanding of the scenario, it is highly suggested that you watch the previous part of the video, which describes the military ties of Niger and US and how all the decisions are taken and situations are being countered effectively. Link for that video is mentioned in the description. Until then, tell us what do you think, that would Niger allow US troops in their country, or they'll strengthen their ties with Russia? While US doesn't seem to evict their power from this region due to insurgency of militant groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Let us know your opinions in the comments section, and don't forget to share the video and like and click on the subscribe button as well for remaining updated of the current trends in this fast-paced modern world. Until next video, stay tuned.